Hello everyone. So welcome to the first episode of our YouTube channel. We're still working on a title, but a couple things that stick to mind are bringing film back from the dead, which is something we're going to kind of do today. So if this is the first video you've seen and there's more out there at the time you're watching this, well, welcome to the show. And so when we started the Celluloid Collective, one of the things that we wanted to kind of do was we really wanted to have some educational content. So teaching you some skills that may seem unattainable, but are actually quite easy. And so that's kind of what we're going to do today. So on our first episode, we're going to learn how to camera scan our negatives. So you've probably realized that the price of film has gotten quite expensive. And so, sorry if that was loud when I touched that. The price of film has gotten quite expensive, and so it's kind of our hope that in learning some of these skills, you'll be able to develop your own film, you'll be able to scan your own film, you'll be able to get some of these things going on your own. So today we're going to look at some film that's already been developed and learn how to camera scan. So welcome to episode 1. All right, so let's get into it. So one of the things that we want to talk about today is kind of demystifying what camera scanning is and how you can do it on a little bit more of a budget. So today we're going to have some tools out. Here in a second we're going to go through the process of actually scanning, and so you can see what that is. We're also going to do it where we're going to just scan it on a phone and transfer it as well. So if you don't have all of these things, you really just need some kind of light table. You could use a white screen on your computer and you could put your negative up to that, and so you really don't need a lot of things, especially if you're not going to print really big. So you'll see there's an enlarger back there. If you wanted to print optically, then that would be something to do. But if you don't, then there's a bunch of other things too. So sorry about that ladder back there. Once again, this is episode 1, so we'll figure it out as we go. So, but today I'm going to turn this camera on really quick so you can see what we're looking at. So we're looking at some negatives. So these come from our friend Teresa. So if you're following us on Instagram, you'll be able to see that Teresa was one of our featured artists a couple of months ago. And she buys some expired paper and expired film, and sometimes it just comes with negatives that are already developed. And so I thought these ones are really interesting because these ones are coming from, they look like they might be coming from Japan, and they're on Kodak safety film. And so Kodak safety film is pretty old. And so I would probably say these are around somewhere in like the 60s. On the front of this, you'll see that it was, these were for Earl. And I think that says 1 each. So not quite sure what that is, but we're gonna scan these today, go through the process, so you can kind of see what we're working with. And so yeah, these are cool. One of the things that I think is really interesting, whenever we get these kind of things, so we do a lot of expired film as well. Looks like there's like a family portrait here, or somebody's playing golf. But we're gonna scan these so we can look at all of them today. So when you're going through camera scanning, what you're going to do is you're going to find the negatives that you want, and then you're going to need a camera scanning device. And so today we're going to use just an X-T3. So this is a Fuji camera that I own, and you'll see that we're not actually going to use a macro lens. We're going to just use some extension tubes. These are very, very cheap, and so whenever I camera scan, I do it on this setup. I shoot it in RAW, and we're going to use Negative Lab Pro at the end. This camera scanning is a 3D printed one from some people down in Australia, and so we'll actually have links to this at the bottom if you want to purchase one of these. But it's basically just a light table and something to hold it, so you don't need to spend a lot of money to get the results that you need, especially when you're first starting out. So they make these, this one, I can't remember the exact price right now off the top of my head. There's some that are up to like $1,000, and so we just personally don't think you need to spend that much, especially if you're just trying to learn. If you're just putting them up on Instagram, your social media, things like that. If you really want to get the fullest quality, watch some of our videos later on in the series where we're going to show you how to actually print optically on the enlarger back there. But for now, we're just going to scan. So take just 1 second, and I'm going to show you what this looks like. you'll see this on now, and what you're going to see is I put just a scrap piece of 35mm in there, and so this is a 120mm carrier, so we're going to be capturing some 120 film today. And so the reason I put these X's on here is because eventually you're going to have to focus this, and so with an extension tube that can be a little bit harder. You're going to have to find the ones that you want. We're using M42 mount lenses today, and so the reason that I do that is I think it just makes the image just a little bit softer. I can already see in the comments below that why don't you use the sharpest one. Film is a little bit softer even whenever it's 120mm. So it has like a nice little fall off, a nice gradation, things like that. And so I just personally like that whenever I'm doing it. If you want to get a macro lens, get a macro lens, use whatever camera you want. I do suggest you shoot in RAW because we're going to take it into Lightroom later, and that's going to give you the most flexibility. But if your camera doesn't shoot RAW, just shoot it in JPEG. The most important part is that we're capturing these memories, and to me that's more important than the resolution of the image. So we're going to turn on the camera here. I've already set up all the focus and everything, and we're going to set this up to RAW. So the camera is already set to RAW, and so what we're going to do is we're going to put a negative in there. So let's take this one, I'm going to take this one with the golfer in the family portrait here. So we're going to lift this up, I'm going to pull out this scrap piece, and I'm going to lay this down. So one of the things to keep in mind, there is a shiny and a dull side. I usually put the shiny side up, that way I don't have to invert it. And so when you're going in here, you can put your shiny side up as well. So we're gonna kind of strap that in there. I'm going to put that in between the negative holder, and then everything's going to be lined up. And so what we're going to have now is, if you saw the back of the camera, you would see that everything is perfectly focused, and we'll be able to take our image. So now you can see this, I'll have it right up next to us. And so what we want to do is we're going to try to aim to be right in the middle of that exposure. So you can kind of turn your f-stop up and down. I try to keep my f-stop around like an f8, and that just allows me a little bit more wiggle room with the focus. So I want to get the whole negative in focus. One of the byproducts of using an extension tube, you could get soft edges, so that's why a lot of people would say I don't want to do that. I've noticed if you go to f8, f16, somewhere in there, use a remote shutter release so you're not actually touching the camera, then you can get it. Because what I really want to do is I want to try to keep the ISO of my digital camera to the ISO of whatever the film was. I don't know what the ISO of this film was because we just received it, so I'm going to go somewhere around like the 200 range. So I would set my ISO to 200, and now I could be able to go through. So that was actually at 320, so I'm going to go to 200, and now I can start changing my shutter speed. So right now my shutter speed is at 1/60th. Looks like I have a lot of room here, so I'm going to go ahead and close this down a little bit and get a little bit closer to that even, so that's 0 there. So once I'm there, I'll have my image kind of set up, and now what I can do is I can just take a picture. So I'm at 1/60th of a second, so that's going to be pretty fast, and now I have it. So what I would do is I would go through each one of these images doing that. So if I go to this next photo here of the woman playing golf, I can slide this image down. You can also see that I'm just using my hands. As long as you're washing your hands and grabbing at the edge and you're not touching where the emulsion would have been or the image actually is, I think it's a little bit easier to move it around. I think you're almost more likely to end up scratching or tearing or bending if you're wearing gloves, because you can't really tell how thick things are. You can't tell how hard you're pushing on things. So I would just take that time to wash your hands, grab at the edges, and kind of move them around. You can always kind of clean them off and everything like that, but I've realized if your hands are really clean, then you're kind of fine. So you'll see now that my next image was at 0, and so I'm right there where I want to be exposure-wise, so I'll take my next photo. And there it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through every one of these images like this until I have all of them taken, and then I'm going to take them into my computer. So what I'm going to do really quick is I'm just going to take all these photos, and then we'll go look at them on a computer. All right, so we went ahead and scanned everything, and so now it's time to bring it into our computer and start editing. So I'm going to be using Lightroom, so that's one of my favorite kind of platforms, so that's what we're going to be using today. And so we're going to go through that process. Like I said earlier, we're also going to be using Negative Lab Pro, and so that's a plugin for Lightroom, and so I'll put some links below if that's something you're interested in using, but I'll also show you how you can just invert the negative. So we got our memory card. I'm going to pull that out and put it into the computer here. I like to make a new folder, so I'm just going to call that Camera Scan Episode 1, which is what we're on right now. And then we can go inside of our folder and we can find all of our photos. So I took these in JPEG and in RAW, so you could see what the difference was. So we're only going to work with the RAW today, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all of these and drag them onto my folder I just created. In RAW, they are much bigger, so we took about 30 photographs, and we have about 2.5 gigs. So we want to do that though, that way we have a lot of information to play with. So you'll see here in a second, a couple of these images were really, really overexposed, almost completely see-through. So I'm hoping that we can save them and see what we have on here. So once everything's done, I'm gonna go ahead and inject the card. I like to do that just so I know that the images are actually on my desktop. And so sometimes whenever you're doing this, you'll notice that Lightroom is trying to grab the card and not actually grab the other things. So here's my card, I'm gonna put that back on my camera so I'll have it for next time, and then I'll be able to dump all those things. So, all right, so we're gonna go into Lightroom and we're gonna start a new catalog. So if you've never used Lightroom, this will be a good way to kind of set up your Lightroom catalog as you're going through. So if you've already done this before, feel free to skip through, but I want to make sure that we have everything. So once we're logged into Lightroom, what we're going to do is make sure that we allow everything. So Lightroom asks you to allow for a couple different folders, and if we don't do this, it'll be really hard to let the computer know what it actually has access to. So if you forget to do this, you'll have to go into the major settings. If for some reason that happens, feel free to drop a comment at the bottom and be able to help you out. So I'm going to allow all of these things to have access. And so now what I'm going to do, since it just made this Lightroom catalog without a name, I'm going to go through the whole process so you can see. So we're going to go File, we're going to go New Catalog, and that's going to pop up. So I'm going to type in Camera Scan Episode 1. I like to keep everything labeled exactly the same, and that way I know when I get back to it. So I'm going to go back to my desktop, I have Camera Scan, and I'm going to have it put it in here with everything else. So it's going to create a folder, it's going to close Lightroom, it's going to reopen Lightroom, and then we're going to be able to get into it. So now we're in here and we're going to import. So you have a couple different options. You can either go File and then Import Photos and Video, or you can just press Import. Once again, we need to allow all these things. It's going to ask you 3 times to get in there. So once you're in here, you have a bunch of drop-down arrows here. So what we want to do is we want to go into the one that's the desktop, we want to go into the one that's Camera Scan, and I want to click on Camera Scan. So here are all my photographs that we just took of these negatives. So you'll see they were 120 images. A couple of them were filled up the whole negative. A couple of them were 1 by 1, so they were probably taken in like twin lens reflex cameras. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to crop all that stuff off, so it's going to be pretty easy. If for some reason your images are not selected, what you're going to do is imagine they look like this. We're going to press Check All, and then we're going to import. So remember, I have JPEGs and I have RAWs of all of these things, so they're all going to be in here. And so you'll see if we have the RAF, that's what I'm bringing in. I want to bring in all the raw images. So now we have everything that's here. If you've never used Lightroom before, it's pretty cool. So if you want to see them just one image at a time, you can go back here. If you want to see the whole grid, if you want to change the size of the thumbnail so you can see them a little bit bigger. So there's a couple things that we just kind of have to do. All right. So now that I have a couple of these done, I'm just going to crop everything, so I'm going to add that to it. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to come into Develop Settings, I'm going to go to Copy Settings, I'm going to check None, and then I'm just going to turn on this crop right here. So that's all I really want to add right now. So I'll click on the next one that hasn't been cropped, I'll hold the Shift button, and I will go to the end of them, which I have 32, right click, Develop Settings, and Paste Settings. So now it's going to crop all of those. What I have to do now is I just have to tell it where I want to crop. So all I'm going to have to do is go through really quick and just kind of move them around. So just get them right inside of that crop tab and make sure I'm not cutting off any of the image that I want to keep. So now that we have everything imported and cropped, we're going to go through the Negative Lab Pro setup. So you don't need to do anything else if you're doing black and white, so it's going to do everything kind of for you. So I have everything cropped, and now I'll be able to get in here. So you'll see some of them are a little dense. We're going to see what happens. So we're going to highlight all of them. I'm just going to press Command A, and then I'm going to go File, plugin extras, and Negative Lab Pro. If you don't have Negative Lab Pro, I'm going to show you what to do here in just a couple of seconds. So we have our digital camera. This is our source. We're going to go color black and white, and then we want a border buffer of roughly 5%. And so what that's going to do is it's going to, outside of that area we cropped, it's going to keep that in the information in there so it knows exactly what's going on. You don't really need to do any of these other things for your first time, so feel free to just bypass those things. If you don't have Negative Lab Pro, you can download it. I think you can also get a trial where you'll be able to get like 10 or 12 free images, so you can see if that's going to work for you. I'm going to press convert. It's going to take a little bit, and so what it's going to do is it's going to go through every single one of those photos and it's going to transfer them into a positive. So it's doing a bunch of calculations on the back end, and it's using technology from different scanners. So the guy that put this together did a really, really good job of being able to get this where it'll kind of transfer. When you do color, it does some really cool things. So you can do between a Noritsu scanner, you can do the different kinds of scans that you might have gotten at a lab, and the colors are going to be a little bit different just because based on that. So we're almost done here. We're through all of our images and everything's going to start to come to life now. So once it's done, everything's going to be in a positive, and then we can go in and we can start doing kind of any kind of editing that we want to do. So, oh, this is so cool. So I'm not going to change anything else over here. I'm going to leave it as is, but I'm going to go ahead and press apply. So now what you'll see is we have our images. So if we go back into our develop tab, I'm going to start rotating these. If you don't know how to rotate, you can always go up to the help tab here and you can type in rotate. And so rotate left, right. So you'll see what the shortcuts are. So we're going to go ahead and do that with the shortcuts. And so command and bracket, and we're going to flip those. So I'm just going to go through and I'm going to do all the, oh my God, these are so cool. So at this point, these images may have never actually been seen anywhere besides in the in its negative form. So we're looking at kind of the past here. So if our whole goal here is to bring film back from the dead, I think this is a pretty good starting point. So, and something that's really only possible with the digital technologies that we have. This is going to be the end of this video. This is camera scanning. So these images will be playing right after the video is done so you can see everything. And if you see something that's in here that's familiar, that you maybe know somebody or somebody that knows somebody, I'd love to find the home for these because this is just very cool that we're able to see this stuff way after the fact. So huge thanks to Teresa. Thank you for tuning in to episode 1. This was camera scanning of bringing film back from the dead. So we'll see you next time and keep shooting.